Why humans started wearing clothes. It wasn't the cold. Last night, without thinking about it, you probably picked out what you're wearing today. Maybe changed your mind once. It's such a boring, automatic decision that nobody even notices making it. But for almost the entire time our species has existed, we're talking roughly 99% of it, that decision didn't exist at all. No fabric. No fur. Nothing. And when clothing finally showed up, it wasn't really about staying warm. That part came a lot later than you'd think. So the obvious problem researchers ran into: how do you figure out when people started wearing clothes, when fabric and animal hide rot away in a matter of decades? There's no ancient shirt buried in a cave from 150,000 years ago. It's gone. Whatever answer exists had to come from somewhere else entirely. It came from lice. Back in 2003, biologist Mark Stonking, working with Ralph Kittler and Manfred Kaiser, was looking at the difference between head lice and body lice. Body lice are actually a separate species. They can only survive in fabric, laying eggs in the seams of clothing. They physically can't live in hair or on bare skin. Which means body lice couldn't have existed before clothing did. The two are locked together. By measuring how much the DNA of head lice and body lice had diverged, the team worked out roughly when that split happened, around 170,000 years ago. Not a guess pulled from thin air, an actual genetic timestamp, the oldest one we have for when humans started covering their bodies. Here's where it stops making obvious sense, though. Modern humans had already existed for over 100,000 years before that point. And archaeologist Ian Gilligan, who spent much of his career on exactly this question, noticed something that breaks the simple story. The earliest clothing evidence comes out of Africa. Warm climate. Long before anyone had migrated into the cold stretches of Europe or northern Asia. If clothing was invented purely to survive freezing weather, the timing is backwards. So what was actually going on? Around that same period, something else starts showing up in the archaeological record: deliberate decoration. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, researchers found ochre engraved with geometric patterns, and shell beads pierced on purpose so they could be strung together, dated to roughly 100,000 years ago. None of that is survival gear. It's symbolic, people marking themselves, signaling something to whoever was standing near them. Clothing was probably an extension of that same instinct. Anthropologists have a term for it: social skin, the idea that what covers your body started out as a message, not a shield. This is my group. This is my status. This is who I am, before a single word gets spoken. Nobody was forcing any of this. There was no survival pressure pushing people toward decoration in a warm, stable climate. They just did it anyway, like the wiring for signaling identity had already been sitting there, waiting, long before it ever had a practical use. The practical use came tens of thousands of years later. The oldest sewing needles we've found, at sites like Denisova cave in Siberia, date to roughly 45,000 to 50,000 years ago, right around when humans were actually pushing into cold, high-latitude territory. Fitted, tailored clothing, the kind that traps heat, looks like a later addition, bolted onto a habit that already existed for a completely different reason. Warmth was clothing's second job. It was never the first one, which is worth sitting with for a second. A lot of us carry this low-grade anxiety about what we wear, like caring about it makes us shallow or vain or too online. But if this research holds up, that instinct isn't some modern flaw. It's one of the oldest communication systems our species ever built, older than writing, older than money, arguably older than complex language itself. People were using what covered their skin to tell strangers something true about themselves, over 100,000 years before clothing ever had to deal with actual winter. So scientists never dug up an ancient shirt. What they found instead was a genetic clock ticking inside the DNA of lice, pointing back roughly 170,000 years. And the reason clothing exists at all wasn't the cold. It was identity, status, belonging, showing up on human bodies tens of thousands of years before anyone needed protection from the weather. Whatever you end up wearing tomorrow, That instinct behind the decision is a lot older than the closet you're standing in front of.